So I guess we're going to carry on a bit with the wholesale model and have a discussion now with Sprint and Taoglas. So if I can invite Wayne up and Tim, I'll grab this seat. Yeah. Yeah. So probably the first thing we should do is note that there's been a change, a substitution. So we have Dermot's picture up on top, and we have Tim Dolan here instead. So Dermot could not make it due to I guess a family tragedy back in Ireland. So instead we have Tim with us today to talk to us. I'd like to invite you guys to introduce yourselves a little bit. So maybe we can start.
Yeah, my name is Tim Dolan. I'm the North American Sales Manager for Taoglas Antenna Solutions. Taoglas is the leading M2M antenna and antenna services vendors. So when you think of antennas, a lot of people are following the cell phones or they're following the laptops. We started 6 years ago concentrating strictly on the M2M market because we know the antennas have to be better and more robust to get onto the different networks. We're located, our headquarters in Ireland. I opened up our North American headquarters in San Diego here in January. We also have a headquarters over in Taiwan, and we have sales offices worldwide.
All right, great. And I actually have to apologize to the audience. We could have been treated to an excellent Irish accent for the entire duration, but instead we have just standard fare, right? Wayne?
Well, I'm from Kentucky, but I have Irish heritage, so maybe it'll come out a little bit. My name is Wayne Ward, and I run Sprint's machine-to-machine business. And for us, that means generally anything that's not a phone. So across business and consumer applications. So, you know, what are we doing that is not a phone? It ranges anywhere from fleet management to usage-based insurance to telematics information to metering, sensors, alarms, people, pets, and packages tracking, personal connected devices like MIDs and gaming devices, obviously tablets and pads and everything of that nature. So it's a really wide scope of opportunity for not just Sprint, but for all the carriers, but also putting in infrastructure and partners in place to be able to go after that marketplace because of the complexity associated with it, and that's what we're doing at Sprint.
We've been talking about M2M here in the venture and entrepreneur space for a long years, but it's actually happening right now, right?
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of devices you guys are selling and connecting out there.
Yeah. Good point, Derek. I mean, M2M is hot and growing now. But it's something that's been around for 10 plus years. I mean, we have a lot of experience doing this. I mean, if you think of early location, we call it locate, navigate, track applications for fleets, hardwired MDUs and vehicles in the field services arena, all of those things have led to this. I think the reason it's very hot now, and it's analogous to right place, right time. It's analogous to cloud computing. I mean, application service providers and hosting and internet data centers and all of that hosting activity has been around for a long, long time. It's now got a cool name called cloud computing, and it's really taking off. So before we called it telematics, before we called it fleet management. Now this entire group of application services have a name. It's called machine-to-machine, and all carriers see that as a significant growth because we do, let's face it, on the P2P side, person-to-person side, on the wireless side, we've got market saturation. Yep. But you know, studies have shown that you're going to have 8, 10, 12, 15, even 20 devices per person that are going to be connected in either a WAN, wireless WAN application, or Bluetooth, Zigbee, and all the other technologies that are out there that having devices connected provide more value to the end user and to the devices themselves.
When we chatted earlier, you had said that the M2M market is characterized not by a lot of large companies, large entities, but by a lot of fragmentation entrepreneurs. Can you tell me about that?
Yeah, it really is. If you take a look at all the partners that we have in place and you take a look at the industry, it's dominated right now by smaller venture capital-backed entrepreneurial companies that some of them have 4 or 5, 6 years into this thing, and now they're seeing the carriers really embrace the technology and really see it as a significant growth. So being able to get out to the marketplace, cater to the development community, work with venture capital back and private equity companies that are bringing applications and hardware and software to this space is a significant part of bringing this to the space. Because when we started this business unit about 2 years ago, We talk to all the big systems integrators, and we talk to all the big application providers and hardware providers out there. And still to this day, they're still sort of studying the space, figuring out what their play is, trying to find out whether this is hype or real. And so it's providing an opportunity there. On the other hand, that drives a lot of complexity because there's a lot of things involved in putting a machine-to-machine application together. For example, you've got chipsets and modules, you've got 2G, 3G, 4G, and there's multiple flavors of all of that. You've got the modules, you've got the firmware, you've got the hardware, you've got the software. And lastly, don't forget about certification and antenna technology. Very, very significant. If you put all that time and energy in being an application together and you can't get good signal, it's not going to work, right? So that's what we see in the marketplace right now from I guess it's a land grab right now in the space.
Great, and that makes a lot of complexity for you to work with, probably. We talk about moving from this 10-year-old discussion of, hey, someday we'll have everything connected, gas and water meters will be connected, and we actually start having them. For apparently a bunch of problems pop up that you hadn't considered when it was just theoretical, like, hey, our antennas or our devices don't actually manage to connect with the network. And I think that's where you come in, right?
Oh, yeah, that's definitely where I came in. I started in the M10 space 10 years ago selling serial to Wi-Fi modules. It didn't really take off, or it took a long time because the modules were selling for $75 or $100. Same with the cellular modems 10 years ago. They were selling for $150. You couldn't stick that in a meter and all of a sudden be efficient. I think with the advent of smartphones, and we're selling a lot of these things now, it's bringing the cost of them down. What you're also starting to see is this makes companies so much more efficient. Even though we've had a real lousy economy the last couple of years or so, companies, this makes them more efficient. They don't cancel these projects. They accelerate these projects. So I think traditionally, when you look at people getting on a network, it's either cell phones or laptops, and those big companies have test chambers, and they have RF people, and they do a very good job at that. Now, all of a sudden, you get into the metering space. What do the people who run a meter know about cellular communications? What do they know about the TRP, the TIS, the RSE requirements to get onto Sprint's network?
Now, you're not just making up those acronyms, right?
I'm not, believe it or not. Because, before we ever met Sprint, we have our lab down in San Diego. We're getting inundated with these people coming to us saying, we failed Sprint, we failed Sprint, we failed AT&T, we failed this, we failed that. So they didn't even know what they were doing. They were just slapping on a wireless module, putting an antenna on, and going right to them to get certification.
So when you say they failed, can you define that more clearly? Because not all of us make products. So in the testing process, what's the test and what did they fail?
Yeah, there's a couple. There's TRP, which is radiated power. You have to be very efficient in how much power you actually radiate. There's TIS, which is isotropic sensitivity, so it's got to be very sensitive. And there's RSE, which is efficiency. So what happens is you can't have a very inefficient device on their network because it drags down their network and it costs money for them to keep that network going. So if they let everybody on, the network wouldn't be very efficient.
Right.
So they have minimum standards. So by coming to us, we know the standards that Sprint set. We know what AT&T and Verizon, all them set. People come to us so that we will help them with the RF design, put in a really highly efficient antenna that we have. So when they go to Sprint, it's like going into like a final exam. You've already got the answers before going in.
Right. You got the Princeton review kind of behind you.
That's right. Yep.
So Wayne, we heard a few years back there was kind of a rush for open where the major carriers in this country all said, hey, we're open. No, we're open. No, we're the most open. Right. And so this is basically what we're seeing with the open. You mean open your network to any device from an M10 perspective, but they have to clear certain hurdles first. Is that basically what we're...
Well, yeah, there's sort of a different grade of certification for machine-to-machine versus smartphones, as an example. And so, we've worked to simplify that process and get it to the point where it's a lot more efficient. And really, it's at the point now where thou shalt not do no harm versus all the rigorous testing and certification goes on for an actual smartphone, as an example. But open, to us means something, probably a little different from my competitors, even a little bit from Light Squared. For us, it means not only having open APIs and open architecture and open elements of the network and catering to the developer community. We're smart enough to know that we don't know everything. And we also know that innovation happens in the marketplace, and innovation happens from developers and the two guys in the garage and the proverbial dog. So we want to have an open mind to how we go about creating new applications and offers in the marketplace, and have no preconceived notions about how these things could work. A lot of folks come to us and it's right off the bat, how much can you charge me per megabyte? And this 4G is different than that 3G, and my flavor is better than yours. I'm like, well, let's just stop and pause for a minute. So talk about the customer experience first. What are you trying to accomplish? What are you trying to sell? Do you plan on doing end user billing? Do you have your own distribution? Do you have your own marketing? And if you think you're going to send out a bill for $2 or $3 a month, why don't you just stop? Why don't you just prepay up front $72 for a 2-year subscription? So you have to break the thinking that we have around telecom services today. And the Kindle is a perfect example. Nobody ever gets a telecom bill, but how do you get books? Using a 3G network, right? And so a lot of that education is still happening. And so not only is it open platforms and open APIs and open operating systems and opening elements of the network, for us it's like having an open mind to finding the right customer experience before you go too far down the path about picking a technology, which is the last thing here. I mean, not all applications require 3G. Some applications can get along fine on 2G, and some are just perfect for 3G.
Right.
All three of those technologies, and even the multiple flavors of 4G that's available today, have a place in the machine-to-machine world unlike any other.
For example, a vending machine doesn't need to send complex video. It could just send "I'm empty" kind of
And
signals.
an alarm sensor. 2G is fine.
How is 2G more economical than 4G? Obviously, the modem hardware cost, et cetera.
First of all, the modules are 20% of the cost of if you can find an LTE ruggedized module in the marketplace, try to find one, right?
Yeah.
Second of all, it's overkill from a throughput perspective. So you've got to be able to match the latency and the throughput and the application characteristics to the business model to find the right thing. So taking a leap of faith to that. On the other hand, let's go the reverse end. If you're going to try to do portable video surveillance systems, wireless is the only option compared to a wired. Remember, I said the word portable.
Yep.
And second of all, you need that latency and that throughput. So 4G is perfect for that.
I've seen a bunch of TV news stations switched over to your WiMAX network.
Absolutely. Why spend $250,000 on a satellite truck, right? So it's those types of things. So we really focus on figuring out, what is the right technology for the right application instead of over-engineering it or under-engineering it.
All right. Tim, you mentioned that the importance of antenna technology, and that a lot of people don't necessarily know it as they approach their product. They're not aware of it. So how do they find you, and how do you find them?
Yeah, very good question there. Well, we try to work with people like Sprint. We try to work with the different carriers.
Yeah.
We try to work with the module vendors out there.
Yeah.
So if there's Centurion of the world, there's Telit, there's U-Blocks, there's a ton of carriers out there. And then, we're doing our own, we have our own expertise in antennas as well. We don't just have those simple rubber ducky right angle antennas that we sell.
Yep.
Right? We're coming up with creative technologies that'll have poly-flexible material with 3M tape on the back so that you'll be able to clip it onto a Telit module and tape it to the inside of one of these devices, and it'll have its own ground plane on it. It'll be 3G compliant, 2G compliant, and I can safely say, hey, this has passed Sprint in 5 or 6 different applications. So there's many different ways people find us. We do have excellent antenna technology, but we are also really getting a good reputation of helping module vendors, OEMs, and carriers get these RF systems working so that they'll be able to get onto their networks efficiently.
Wayne, you talked in the last spoke, you talked a lot about trying to capture the innovation and find innovators. Understanding you don't know everything. Just to be clear, that's not just in the doesn't just apply to the M2M space. You're here in Silicon Valley trying to capture all innovations. Correct?
Oh, absolutely. Except for my quota is not retired unless it's M to M. So I tend to be oriented towards that. But obviously, Android is very important to us, and smartphone applications, et cetera. But one thing I would just want to tag on to here in terms of how do you meet each other. Perfect example, and it's a plug for the facility here, is we actually connected via the Telecom Council meeting a few months ago. So that's how we found Taoglas as a partner. And they weren't a partner then, sort of a meet and greet. From that, we kept having conversation about, how could we partner? And lo and behold, we had a customer that we've launched. It's publicly available, called Ecotality, that builds electric vehicle charging stations. I mean, think about that space as we all move to electric vehicles. There's a gas station on every corner. There's not a public venue electrical charging station everywhere. Part of the hesitancy people have is like, well, I get too far, how do I get electricity back? So that's a big partner of ours. And, they had already picked out, a Sierra module. They have a real good design, a great business model. They're up and running in 3 states. Couldn't get the antenna to work. Yeah. Couldn't get it certified.
So what do they need connectivity for? For billing and for location?
Well, billing, point of sale. I mean, how are you going to charge for it? But they also need to monitor the usage and how much electricity is being pumped in and out of that thing. And frankly, they they got a lot of metal and glass casing and all that kind of stuff and plastic, just it wasn't working. So one thing that they forgot about is how do we design the antenna in this metal, glass, and plastic environment that's got rain and heat and everything that goes associated with that. And we have testing facilities and chambers there, but we're not antenna experts. Yeah. We rely on partners for that, and that's how we connect.
Yeah, I have a pretty good story about that. When I opened up our North American headquarters in January, the managing partner, Dermot, who's up there, was moving from Ireland to San Diego to actually run the facility. Well, he's very good friends with David Smith at Enterprise Ireland. Right. And he said, hey, I need to be networking correctly here. We're in San Diego. Where should I go? Yep. And the first thing David said was the Telecom Council in Silicon Valley. Yep. So he moved here in February. I think his first meeting here was either in March or April. That's where they met Wayne. They hooked up, and here we are 4 or 5 months later with a collaboration. So there's a lot of power, I think.
Was that Anne Louise is also your representative here? Who did that?
Exactly. She's focused on business development here. She is. I saw her somewhere.
She's in the back there. You can just stand up. Anne Louise. So anybody who wants to meet Sprint in Silicon Valley, Anne Louise is a great contact here for that.
She's got one of the cheap seats back there. Yeah. But from there, now we have a full-blown partnership because we, jump the street here. The last plug here is we have built what we call the Machine-to-Machine Collaboration Center. And in that center, it's housed with Sprint engineers and employees. There's testing chambers and access to 2G, 3G, and 4G, RF signals. And it's actually very purpose-built to house our partners. So we have virtually staffed it with our partners and equipment and technology and demo modules from our partners. And from that interaction at the Telecom Council to the customer opportunity we worked on, it's now evolved to where they're going to be a partner in our collaboration center as well.
Great. Tim, one thing we didn't get to yet is, so you have a partnership with Sprint. You're working with some module makers or some people who are making electric vehicle charging stations, for example. Who's paying you? How does your company make money?
Yeah, we make money like everybody else. We sell antennas. So if you have the OEM who has the device, and then you have the module maker who puts their module in the device, then we have the antennas, and then Sprint wants to sell data plans. Well, we all need to get to market as efficiently as possible. So do we make money on testing services? Yeah, we make a little bit of money, but that's not, we want to sell more antennas. We're just like everybody else. So the better we can get people to market and onto Sprint's network, the quicker all of us start making money.
So Sprint's not paying you, you're not paying them, they're just bringing you in as partners in an ecosystem to work towards that end OEM product.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah, and from that perspective, it's no different than our core business, meaning we make our money on network, especially in the machine-to-machine space, right? And we have revenue share agreements with various partners around applications, but the primary purpose is, cutting through the complexity, all of these different elements that make up an MDM solution, getting them certified, tested through the prototyping process, and get it to market and get it on the network.
So it seems like what we have here is a case, a few different cases we're looking at today. This is a case where there's not actually a financial relationship between the two companies, but it's part of the ecosystem. So there's a lot of ways of working with the carrier beyond just selling your product.
Yeah, a lot of in-kind stuff. Demo equipment and testing equipment and providing facilities. Providing office space and access to certain tools that are a part of our partner toolkit, et cetera.
And it's not, by no means, is it exclusive, or can you work with any carrier?
No, we can work with any carrier, but Sprint has really been a great partner for us. We're the first one to approach them and vice versa. We see them in the M2M space out there all the time. There's plenty of carriers out there, but their team does an excellent job. So
great.
We see them most.
Going to move towards closing, but I know Wayne's got one slide we got to call up. So if Eric can pull that up, and then so we'll take questions after Wayne does his slide. You guys got anything you'd like to add to the discussion before we wrap up?
Yeah, it's been a great year for Taoglas. We have a test chamber over in Ireland, one in San Diego, and one in Taiwan. They're both 2G and 3G compliant. We're going to have them 4G compliant by Q1 of 2012, so we're very excited about that. And Derek, you had mentioned we like to see other people set up more labs here in Silicon Valley. We are already in discussions right now, but potentially setting up our own lab or partnering with Sprint or somebody else up here in the Silicon Valley area to actually open up a test lab. So it's going to be an exciting 2012.
Very good. Wayne, closing comments, and you've got your slide.
Yeah, not a lot on my one-page PowerPoint here, but just a way for you to connect to us. So if you can't grab myself or Anna Louise during this conference, and you want information on the Collaboration Center, again, it's up in Burlingame, about a 5-iron from the tarmac at SFO. That's where all the machine-to-machine ideation and innovation happens for Sprint. Obviously, about our product lines and the different offers we have in the marketplace at sprint.com/M2M. And a little plug for our annual Solutions Conference, which is coming up November 2nd through 4th here in Santa Clara. I think it's our third straight year here at the Santa Clara Convention Center in the Valley. And it's just been growing every year. Last year we had, I think, somewhere around 1,500 participants. So that's how you register and to find more about our Developers Conference.
Excellent. So we're going to go to questions. I see one by the aisle. If we get a microphone on the left aisle. And Jaylene, one right here, we'll take next.
Johan Huber from Macy's. One of the areas that I look at is trying to create seamless experiences for the customer in store, out of store. And when we get into our store environments, some of those walls are real thick. And I spent some time with some buddies in Australia, and when I lived in Japan, one thing I always loved is I could go from one location to another, still be on the cellular network. I didn't have to switch over to Wi-Fi. And what I'm really dying to see, what I've seen in places like Australia is where they subsidize some of the cost of getting these antennas deployed in the store. So then when our customers, come into the store, they don't have to be jumping back and forth. Okay, I got to hop on my phone. I got to turn on the Wi-Fi. They can just use existing cellular so we can provide a better experience for them. And I'm curious, what is it that you think needs to happen in the U.S. for us to get some good carrier-agnostic antenna solutions at a good price point in the stores? From what I've seen in some markets, it's the shopping centers that subsidize it, and then they will, sublease the backhaul to the carriers, and so that's kind of how they figured out to make it work. But what do you think what will it take to make it work in the U.S.?
Yeah, well, that's pretty much how it's done today. How you described it is providing in-building distributed antenna systems, being able to bring RF right into the facility and distribute it over fiber or Cat5 or whatever the technology is, and then being able to do multi-mode. So in the past, we've had a group that I started at Sprint about 10 years ago called Custom Network Solutions, and we've really been, hardwiring, facilities for enterprise customers that is sort of free because it's operating in our RF, but based on a commitment to buy X number of phones for us, et cetera. And of course, there's public venue plays and things of that nature where those networks have gotten built out. But what we have seen in the last 2 to 3 years is that business model has changed, and you're seeing lots of companies come in the marketplace that are focused on neutral host. So we have a bunch of partnerships that work in those neutral host environments where they bring in the infrastructure, and then they manage the infrastructure, and then we plug in, if you will, to those different infrastructures to provide connectivity in building. It's certainly not as problematic as it was, say, 10, 15 years ago, because it's unless you're in the basement of a 3-foot thick concrete walled building, it's pretty tough not to get some type of signal. But on the other hand, I mean, in the machine-to-machine space, things like Wi-Fi and those local area technologies, provide an offload strategy, my competitors call it, but they play in the same space. So it takes money to build these sophisticated in-building systems, and so unless an enterprise or like a retailer or the mall owner wants to pay for that, it's very difficult for any individual carrier to justify spending hundreds of thousands of dollars to build that out for a roamer, if you will. So that's created this opportunity for these third-party neutral host vendors to come in based on their business model, leasing footprint space and power and backhaul from the tenant, then having us plug into it and providing a revenue stream for them. It's really the only way to attack it.
So we got time for one more right here.
Great, thank you. My question for...
Well, we'll wait 1 second. It's probably on. Just give him a second to turn it up.
Can you hear me? Okay, there you go. A quick question for Wayne. Actually been doing quite a bit of leading a market, an M2M initiative and doing some market assessment right now. And I've had the chance to talk with some of your peers actually on the European side, but also on the Asia side. Obviously some tremendous traction in Europe for things like smart utilities, smart meters. Asia has some big visions for smart cities, and China Mobile wants to have 1 billion connected devices, I think by 2015 or something like that. So some very aggressive plans. But when you start looking at the reality of the M2M business from a service provider standpoint, let's take one very concrete example, smart metering business model. A $3 ARPU, which is, I think, very realistic. We've analyzed that and looked at the business model. About 1/6 to 1/5 of that is the connectivity fee that the service provider can invoice to the utility customer. And really the rest, the value resides in the data analysis, gathering, reporting, et cetera, et cetera. And we see an analytics layer coming on top of that that even adds more value. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit more about, in addition to the network and enabling the network, what kind of value you foresee Sprint can deliver to your M2M customers, but also to your developer partnership ecosystem.
You're referring specifically to smart grid or just in general?
In general, but realizing that all those business models vary too, right?
So let me just speak in general for a quick. I'll try to make this quick because obviously this is can be a long conversation, but I'll try to go succinct as possible. So if you think about the machine-to-machine space, and I'll talk just briefly on smart grid, you could still make a heck of a lot of money only providing network. Because unlike the P2P networks, when I say P2P, I mean people-to-people, trying to distinguish that, we're basically selling, network access that's low bandwidth, that's bursty, not thirsty. We're not sending out end-user billing. We're not providing phone upgrades. We're not providing subsidies. You're basically generating revenue with very, very low cost. Again, no individualized billing, no monthly billing, no credit collections, and you're signing up 7, 8, 10-year deal contracts that do not churn. So those if you wipe out all those costs, you wipe out the distribution costs, the marketing costs, the end-user billing cost, and all of that, and I'll quote Glenn Lurie on this. A dollar in ARPU, if it's 90 cents profit, it's a pretty good business to be in. I'm quoting him from CTIA, but he's a good guy actually. But if you take a look around the rest of the ecosystem, you're exactly right. Particularly in connected transportation, we're moving up the value stack, right? So we don't think it's in our best interest to give away all the ecosystem revenue and only take maybe 20% of it. And where we're seeing that mostly right now is in connected transportation. So every auto OEM in the United States and abroad right now are putting modules in their vehicles. The basic application is OnStar type services, et cetera, but expanding them there into all kinds of infotainment applications, et cetera. And being able to be, if you will, the general contractor for an auto OEM as an example, and do revenue share on the entire stack of services that are being deployed is a significant revenue opportunity for the carriers that we are definitely participating in. And then somewhere in the middle, so that was one extreme to another, there are obviously relationships we have today with people that are in the navigation business, and I'll use one of our partners, Trimble, for an example, where we basically sell the bundle of their service, the hardware, the software, the network fee, and put it on our bill, and then we do revenue share with them on the back end. Right, so we participate, in the middle of the stack with some of our partners as well. So I think it's misleading to think that it's only network. But again, if you wipe out a lot of the cost, only network, light squared, you heard it, you can still make pretty good money, right? As you're shedding a bunch of other costs, and all the way to like growing a revenue stream with by moving up the value chain and the stack of applications that are there.
I didn't want to announce the margin number, but I'm happy to talk to you offline about some margins that we've seen.
Yeah. Yeah, very good.
As you said, that is a very long discussion because it's kind of one of the
That's
more
as quick as I
interesting
can make
topics.
it.
I'm sure, I'm sure if we got an NDA too, we'd have a longer discussion.
Oh, yeah, a more specific one, yes.
So let me see if I'm on. Yep. So with that, I think I'd like to wrap up and say thanks a lot to Wayne and Tim. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.